Hello. Our story begins interlocked in a fist fight between the Jedi Master and the pupil of the unknown, Qimir and Sol, battling each other out of pure strength. The stranger was strong, deadly, and defined by his youth, whereas Sol continued to bat the Sith's physical attacks away. Sol shoved forward, smacking his opponent in the stomach and face, unbridled attacks without any prepared defense, until it then came in the form of a counter. Qimir smacked Sol back, beating him in the stomach before Sol recoiled. He avoided a strike, dragging Qimir's arm behind his back and shoving it towards the tip of his spine, forcing his opponent to bend forward. A punch to the abdomen before pushing Sol away, their arms interlocked on one side, as Sol brought his young opponent around and headbutted him, then dragged his hand behind Qimir's shoulder and threw him to the ground. The individual without a name was kicked in the stomach, throwing him across the brush of Khofar. Without even a shred of hesitation, similar to his self-proclaimed defense of Mae on Brendok, his lightsaber ignited after he pulled it into his hand with the Force. The stranger struggled to get to his feet, and Master Sol, despite all of his Jedi training, stepped forward and pulled Qimir up with his hand and dragged the lightsaber down across the stranger's chest, killing him nearly instantly. Instead of gratification, he felt shame. Sol did this to stop the killing rampage that was nearly completed by his opponent. His lightsaber hung in his hand, as Osha continued calling him out, the name Sol ringing through the Force without receiving a response from her former teacher. Master Sol extinguished his lightsaber, and then the noise fled into his ears again. He turned back and looked at Osha, who was stopped in her tracks. Her eyes looked from the body, to the lightsaber, to the Master. He shook his head as if he were jarring himself from his thoughtless gaze. He told her that they needed to go. He would retrieve Mae, and they would return to the shuttle so they could contact Coruscant. Osha asked why he did it though. While she was here to bring her sister to justice, she wanted to know why he killed an unarmed man. Despite Qimir having killed 7 Jedi here on Khofar, he was defenseless when he was killed, something that in its nature went against the Jedi Code. Sol frowned. His eyes looked down to the dead man, as he told Osha that he was too dangerous to be kept alive. He would address Master Vernestra immediately. Though there was yet another thought plaguing the Jedi Master. Did he want to tell the Council about his mistake on Brendok, and then show them what had happened? He had all the evidence. Did he want to tell Osha the truth? Did he want to avoid the truth about his execution of the man here on Khofar? Sol frowned, before telling her to go and find Basil and get back to the ship, contact the temple using a specific frequency code, and get Master Vernestra to assemble a crew to come out here and assist them. She asked what he was going to do, and he explained that he was going to get Mae and check on Master Kanaka. Obviously, he was probably dead, but he still wanted to check on his friend. The poor soul had blamed himself for a possession, not under his control. On Kashyyyk, there was a cultural agreement for Wookiees, and if they used their claws for wrong, it was called a mad claw, and they were dishonored for using them. Despite what they had told their friend, he couldn't listen. He blamed himself for what had happened, which is why he was here in isolation on Khofar. Osha left to find Basil, and they returned to the Poland 717 Jedi shuttle, and sent out a long-range communication to Coruscant, informing Master Vernestra that they were in need of assistance. The Jedi Master was worried, and so she prepared to leave. Of course, there was a worry for her. A rising Senator Rayencourt was trying to get the Senate to begin an external review of the Jedi Order. Vernestra was speaking to Abinendo Senator Izwa Chnant about Rayencourt's growing popularity and the potential of this review being accepted within the Senate. This more so was a review that was supported by members of the Senate from the expansion region, which was a thin line that stretched across the galactic map between the inner and mid-rims. Senator Chewant informed Vernestra that these weren't things to worry about. Many members of the Republic continued to back the Jedi Order, and he had no doubt that the Supreme Chancellor, Drellick, would remain on the side of the Jedi. Of course, as long as there were no precedents for him to see as reason to side with Senator Rayencourt on the situation. The senator finished what he had to say, explaining that the review itself should not be cause for worry. The Jedi were always transparent with the Senate. This was just another case of an eager senator grasping for power. Vernestra appreciated this, and she left with Jedi Padawan Mog and a couple other volunteers that came with them to investigate the situation on Khofar. On the planet of Massacre, Mae and Sol walked through the forest together. Light was rising on the jungle world, and they were silent. She was frustrated, but she was still looking for a way to escape. There was none. They stopped in the forest and she turned around with anger, telling him that he would die for what he did to them, for what he did to Osha. Sol shamefully stopped. His lips formed a frown without opening. There were so many ways to phrase it, and so he went with the one he wished he could have. So many years had been spent thinking about what ifs. What could have gone differently on Brendok with Kalnaka, Torben, and Indara? It was all wrong, but it could not be undone. Sol released a deep breath as he told her that he planned on making everything right when they returned to Coruscant. Her face rang with anger, telling him that it would only make things worse for her. First he took her mother's life, and now he would take her life away? A life as an inmate wasn't something that would make things better, only worse. Sol knew that there would be no winning this. He hadn't exactly given her any reason to trust him or believe that he would make the right decision here. He told her that he couldn't guarantee anything because she was in alignment with whatever that thing was, the one that killed 7 Jedi. Whatever that was, whatever he was, would get her in more trouble than her assassination of 2 Jedi Masters, being that Sol knew she wasn't the one capable of killing the Wookiee Jedi Master. He pressed her forward, and when they emerged from the forest, Osha was waiting patiently. They walked Mae inside the ship as Osha went to the cockpit to cool off. In her mind, she still believed that her sister had rightly killed their mother in her rage. She wasn't wrong to believe this. She had been taught to think this way. Sol wanted to speak with Mae, but at this point, he wanted to wait until they could go back to Coruscant. When the next Jedi transport arrived, Master Vernestra walked out flanked by a number of other Jedi Knights and Padawans. She looked to Sol, who bowed, and she did the same. He told her that he would lead her into the site, and she nodded, dispatching a couple of other Jedi to look after Mae until they returned. A couple of caskets were fetched for the fallen Jedi, and of course the individual that Sol referred to as Stranger. They spoke about the terror of the night on the way to the scene, and when they arrived, the words wouldn't do it justice. Vernestra walked over to the bodies, holding her hand out and feeling each event trickle up her arm. Chills was all she could feel, and what made it worse was what was unidentifiable. Behind the Cortosis mask, the Stranger was just that, unidentifiable. But as she walked around the corner, she saw the body of someone she knew, aside from those of the Jedi that she had seen leave with Master Sol earlier. Vernestra, with her hood raised, knelt down beside the body of her former pupil. She didn't realize he had survived. Master Vernestra was so heartbroken. As a Jedi prodigy herself, there are many that aspired to be like her, but she, at this moment, wished that she had the wisdom of her late master, Council Member Stellan Gios. He would have had the words to say when she lost Qimir, and he would inspire her to grow beyond what she had lost here on Khofar. She pressed her hands against his temple and apologized for having failed him. She looked back to Sol and stood up, asking for any extra details, and they were given. 9 bodies were taken back to the transport. 7 fallen Jedi, 1 fallen Stranger, and 1 fallen Jedi who had abandoned the path. Master Vernestra had matters to define for herself, and the future of the Order, but the first thing was first, addressing Senator Rayancourt upon a return to Coruscant. Sol, on the other hand, relieved Mog and the other Jedi watching over Mae, and took his shuttle back to Coruscant, following Vernestra's shuttle. There wasn't much to say inside their ship. Sol told Osha inside the cockpit that he had made a terrible mistake, but he refused to elaborate on it, expressing that he would tell her everything there was to know upon their arrival to Coruscant. She didn't like this, but she was willing to wait, being that her own master had conditioned her to forgive him if the truth ever came out. It wasn't intended to be negative, but Sol had trained Osha to forgive her sister, which in all actuality was to forgive him. He hoped that it would be something that could be accomplished when they returned to the temple. As they did, Vernestra went to a separate building from the temple. It was a Republic building placed so that the Jedi, representatives, business conglomerates, and senators could all interact with each other in a neutral space. Senator Rayancourt was troubling the 100-year-old Jedi Master, informing her that he had every intention to get the Senate to begin its external review of the Jedi Order, calling them an entity that claimed to be a religion, so that they could get extensive influence in the galaxy they did not control. While their magic impressed the likes of his peers, Rayancourt didn't believe that such magic translated into wisdom. However, with their accomplice caught, Vernestra was able to brilliantly push these talking points away, especially those about a Jedi that could ruin it all, a Jedi that could upend everything, and could not be stopped. While Qimir had been a Jedi, he wasn't in the public eye, and a failed Padawan never got people's attention. It wasn't exactly uncommon either. The reason Qimir's case had gone unnoticed was because he was assumed dead. He had fallen off the map. Inside the archives, it was stated that Vernestra had to terminate him because of his turn to evil. However, evil in of itself did not represent the Sith. In an era where the Sith had been gone for a millennium, there were a multitude of factions that popped up. In contrast to priests, the Barrando Sages, and the Guardian of the Wills, there were the Night Sisters, the Brendok Coven, and Dark Force. These different sects were just that. The Barrando Sages were not the Jedi, just like the Night Sisters were not the Sith. Just a flagrant group of Force wielders that used darkness rather than balance, harmony, and light. The fall of Qimir was also silenced because, aside from the Lost 19, no one really cared if a Jedi fell away from the Order. There wasn't any need to. Many of those who didn't pass their youngling trials would have to assimilate back into the normal lifestyle of a regular citizen. Some would find work inside the temple and so forth, but for centuries, these individuals were never a problem. Most wouldn't turn an eye for a knight, and they certainly wouldn't do it for a youngling and or Padawan. Regardless, while Vernestra was preparing her own report and examining the body of her former student, including his weapon and armor, Master Sol was preparing to face the High Council. Sol had been obsessed with the versions in the Force that was present on Brendok. It's entirely why he wanted both twins to be with him when he faced the Council. Mae was silent and trying to get her sister's attention. Osha, on the other hand, was not giving in. She knew her sister was trying to gaslight her, and she refused to fall for it. Oh, how wrong she would be. Sol scanned the members of the High Council. Yoda was seated in the middle, looking at the Jedi who had lost his friends as of late. He inquired about what had happened and how he was doing. Sol nodded and spoke. His voice was a little unsteady. It had been a long time since he had spoken to the Council, let alone Yoda, but that wasn't why he was nervous. He told the counselors that he was alright. With Kelnaka found dead on Khofar, that tied off the last of his squad, excluding himself, from the mission to Brendok. Yoda nodded his head, but Sol spoke up, finding the bass in his voice, telling the council that he had made a mistake. The deaths of his friends was his burden to bear, and not that of Mae. The members looked to each other inquisitively. Sol told them that 16 years ago on Brendok he had made a mistake, one that triggered a whole series of events. While Sol wasn't the sole perpetrator, the events on Brendok were not a reflection of the Jedi, rather the fallacies of sentience. Their individual mistakes led to this, but Sol did not admit that. He suggested that the entire scenario should ride on his back. He explained that they detected that there was a vergence in the Force on Brendok, one that gave a coven of witches more power than any individual being or group of beings should have access to in the galaxy. As Sol explained, he told the council that behind him was proof that the witches of Brendok were able to cultivate the Force in supernatural ways. These two girls, Osha and Mae, were not twins. They were not siblings. They were the exact same person, not a vergence, but created by it. The council was all shocked and appalled, and Master Yariel Poof asked where their mother was. Osha tried to speak up, but Sol cut her off before she could say a word, telling the council that he was the reason why she was not here. A tear slipped down Mae's face as the words sprung out of Sol's mouth. Osha's jaw dropped, and her eyes found her former teacher. He could feel those eyes on him, and she asked what he meant. Sol turned back with a broken heart, apologizing but explaining that it was true. He told the council that if anyone should be punished, it was him. He failed them. While there was no way for him to understand what Mother Anasaya was trying to do, Sol didn't even know he was protecting Mae until it was too late. He murdered Mother Anasaya in cold blood, and that was his fault. Everything happened because of that one event. The council collectively sat in silence. Eyes moved to each other and then back again. Sol tried to comfort Osha, but she stepped back. All of her faith had been placed in him. All of her love, adoration, sense of protection belonged to him. And it was all a lie? He lied. The Jedi had broken their promise. She looked back to Mae, who watched the realization wash over her sister's face. She wanted to help, but she couldn't. Without the influence of Qimir to tap into those natural and dark feelings, Osha tried to rely on what her master taught her, but how could she? There was no way for her to feasibly do that. He taught her to forgive someone who had wronged her, to forgive a being that took away the life of a mother who chose their child over her coven, and supported the decisions of said child. Osha chose the Jedi, and it seemed they had not chosen her. She backpedaled away, and very quickly did it become apparent that Osha was not informed. A frown formed on Yoda's face as Sol's hand remained outstretched to his former student. Yoda spoke up, raising his head and instructing the Jedi closest to Osha to take her and her sister out of the room. Sol turned back after the sizzling of the doors left the chamber in an unprecedented silence. Master Sol apologized as Oppa Rancisis asked if he hadn't told her the truth. Sol explained that he had not. He wanted to keep her safe, while it may have initially been selfish and human desire. He wanted to make right of something that was so wrong, a mistake he had made. The council then pressed further, demanding answers for why he withheld information about the Coven, Brendok, and the Virgins from the council, and why the report filed by Master Andara said that a fire ravaged the Coven of Witches. Sol told them everything and expressed with all of his heart that he never wished for this to happen. He was trying to protect his student, and without Mae, he couldn't feasibly prove that Brendok had a Virgins, one that needed to be protected by the Jedi. Yoda's face drifted to the floor as his eyes closed. He addressed Master Sol and told him that the council would have the decision in the coming hours, and he was dismissed for now. On the other hand, while the drama was ensuing with the intentionally created daughters of the Brendok Coven and Master Sol, Master Vernestra was preparing for her conversation with the council. She had important information to address regarding the decisions of Senator Rayancourt. The situation regarding Qimir wasn't finished, and Vernestra wanted to make sure she had the full story before reporting it to the council. Rightly so, she did not believe the fall of her student related to a Sith plot. Simply an individual traveling down the wrong path and becoming corrupted through the power of the dark side. Master Vernestra was more than familiar with individuals who struggle with the dark side. She was 100 years old. Some of these people were able to rise above it, others were not, and she saw all of that. She knew that whatever her former apprentice went through must have been challenging, but this did not confirm that there was something more going on. Of course, there were words that she had said before regarding something that could tip the scales. What that was, she was unsure, and without a fully transparent story, she could not tell the council because they would distrust her for that. Instead of telling the council about her former pupil, she told them about Senator Rayancourt and his intentions. He would be addressing Supreme Chancellor Drellick in the coming hours, and she planned on reverting to a strategy that would encourage the Senate to refuse and refute an external review. Yoda and the council agreed. While they were familiar with the fact that 3 masters from Brendok had been killed, including the additional on Khofar, these things were not abnormal events, per se. Vernestra Rwoh was instructed to remind the Senate that serving on behalf of the galaxy was a deadly job, one the Jedi took with honor and diligence. Those that were killed lost their lives to a rogue assailant, nothing more. The council believed Qimir was simply that, an individual who had gone rogue and lost what he was taught by an exceptional master. Before Rwoh left, Yoda reminded her that the fall of Qimir did not plague her legacy as a Jedi Master. She didn't say much, but she did bow to the Grand Master before preparing for the Senate hearing. Hours later, Sol would be brought back to the council chambers, where he would again apologize and highly suggest he take the blame for everything. After hours of discussion, they had come to the decision, informing Master Sol that they would give him a choice. If he wanted to remain a Jedi, he needed to take a Barash vow and remain in it for 5 years, meditate on his failures and his decisions at Brendok. Afterwards, he was to return to the council and inform them of what he had learned. The other option was that he would be removed from the Jedi Order effective immediately. It was his choice. Sol then asked what they were going to do with Mae, and the Master of the Order told him that the information regarding the twins was not something that he was to be made aware of. Sol tried to reason with the council, so that he could know, but this revealed their greatest fear regarding him. Master Sol was a wise Jedi, but it was now more apparent than ever before that he let his attachment get the best of him. He formed a bond with Osha, and he intervened. Mae's actions were horrific, and they did deserve punishment. But more than that, she deserved justice herself, for what they had been through as children as a result of Jedi interference. Master Sol would choose the route of the Barash vow, despite his desire to be there for Osha, but it was the best thing for him. The minds of the council were right. Especially after losing his second pupil, Jeki, it was likely best for him to spend time inside of a meditative state, or like Master Infla who had gone to Aldolium for his own Barash vow. Sol decided he would go to Quen, where the Gem Cities were. It had been 100 years since the Grand Renewal led by Master Oppa Rancisis. It was a Jedi outpost, but the Gem Cities and floating artificial islands would make for a serene place for him to find himself again. The council would send a member with the twins back to Brendok, including a couple of other Jedi, and they would assist the twins with settling in, or of course, somewhere else if they wanted to. They were going to pardon Mae, being that it was because of Sol and Dara, Torben, and Kelnaka that she acted out. It maybe wasn't their greatest decision, but they planned on following through with it. They also planned on investigating the nature of the virgins on Brendok and protecting it, this of course being if what Sol told them was correct, which did involve the twins being present for them to figure it out. While the council was making amends for the mistakes of their members, Sol and Vernestra would have one final conversation, one where he asked that she keep a close eye on Osha and Mae. He wouldn't be able to be around much longer. His mistakes had finally become knowledge to the council, and he was going to Quen to begin a 5-year Barash vow. She nodded her head and promised that she would, wishing him well on his journeys. Master Ro, on the other hand, moved to the building adjacent to the temple so that she could interact with Supreme Chancellor Drellic. She told him, and the rest of the Senate committee assembled, exactly what Yoda had instructed her to say. Her transparency with the senators helped them feel confident in the decision to avoid an overview of the order. Simply put, Vernestra revealed everything and explained why this case was being kept close to the chest. She told them that it was very uncommon for them to interact with beings of the Force that used the dark side. Drellic asked why that was, and she almost took pity in him, because it was one of those laws he as a chancellor oversaw. But she explained that the Republic, in collaboration with the Jedi Order of old, ensured that an ancient religion called the Sith could never find placement in the galaxy again. They were illegal. Her eyes shifted from the Chancellor to Senator Raincourt, and continued her sentiment, suggesting that it'd be wise for the Senate to keep an eye on their own laws. The Jedi did not betray the Republic, and their alliance should have never been questioned. She believed that this was an isolated incident, and it was not in relation to the Sith, reminding them that Jedi did die to pirates, slavers, criminal syndicates, and whatnot in the service of the galaxy. Dying to a Force wielder was not exactly common, but it also wasn't uncommon for a Jedi to die for the people of the galaxy. Vernestra propped her shoulders up and asked if she could do anything else for them. The members of the committee shook their heads, deciding that a formal overview was not necessary. The following 2 years would be a return to normalcy for the Jedi Order. While quite a few people would read about the events that transpired on Brendok and Khofar, these were events that came and went with the times. Vernestra continued to use her resources to further investigate the case with her former student. She didn't have definitive evidence for it being anything more than what she thought it was, so she was left to collect evidence on what she could. With this, Master Ro took on another student. This wasn't intentional and something she never planned on doing, but Yord Vander had been training Tassi Loa, the poor Zygerian Padawan who was left without an instructor after Khofar. Vernestra kept the young Jedi balanced out, and assisted her with getting over the loss of her master, being that Master Ro had to do that very young into her career as a Jedi as well. The two of them made a good duo, so it was a nice arrangement on both sides of the equation. Tassi, as per her master's instructions, had been watching over the twins from Brendok. While they weren't living there anymore, they were secretly being consistently monitored. This was not a council-sanctioned mission, and it was something they'd probably disagree with. With Mog becoming a Jedi Knight in the months following the Khofar incident, Vernestra assigned him to the mission of watching the twins from a distance, which is what he did. On Brendok, a new Jedi outpost was established, with an archivist leading the way for the Order there. They were able to obtain so much information from this. Of course, this came with a cleansing of the area infected by its dark past. Vernestra was convinced that there was something more here. She had examined everything with her former student. The cortosis, the crystal, so much of it led to darkness. The Jedi had knowledge on some of the locations where the metal was found, but none of those places were where Qimir had harvested it with his young master. Tenebrous and Plagueis weren't exactly the most loyal to the rule of two, which is why it was encouraged by Tenebrous to have a student. If they wanted to be conscious individuals, especially ones that would live long beyond their human counterparts, why not practice? The two Sith saw the youngest of them as a project to learn from. Plagueis, only being in his mid-30s by this point, had not a care in the world for the rule of two. They did acknowledge Qimir's failure, and they had decided, with Plagueis leading the way, to entrap the twins from Brendok. There might be power there that they could look into. The Sith were unaware of their creation and how it was done, as well as the virgins on Brendok. All they knew was Qimir was invested in Mae for a long time. Now that he was gone for 2 years, they were ready to spring the trap. The Sith had been establishing some early connections with the Trade Federation, and that's where Mae and Osha came in. Due to having worked for the Trade Federation in the past, Osha was able to secure her and her sister with jobs. While the Jedi tried to make amends, neither wanted anything to do with the Order. Instead, the sisters became mechanics and worked side by side on a small Trade Federation cruiser. It was simple work, and in their mind, it was far removed from the pressures of light and dark. Out on Quinn, Sol was seated in a forest outside the Jedi outpost, on one of the many floating islands. He was mumbling to himself over and again. It was a ritualistic saying used by the Jedi, "I am one with the Force, and the Force is with me." Sol, despite the tragedy that had rocked his life, was adjusting well. He learned to stop blaming himself for Jackie's death on Khofar, and he taught himself to free his mind from the trauma of losing 7 friends under his guidance and leadership. Not to mention his little streak with darkness where he executed the stranger. The one thing he couldn't let go of was his attachment to Osha. He loved her, truly and full-heartedly. Like a father, he couldn't imagine hurting her, and he didn't. He gave her a trauma that she might not be able to recover from, and that was entirely his fault. He needed to let go of that. He could accept the blame for it, but he needed to come to peace with it first. A mistake is one that should last in the moment, not a lifetime. But the tragedy is, it completely upended another individual's life. The lesson he kept returning to was, this was exactly why the Jedi forbade attachment. Not because it's bad in essence, but because it disrupts one's judgment. It causes them to choose one life over another, which is what he did. Vernestra and Tassie, on the other hand, kept close behind the twins, trailing the Trade Federation cruiser, with another Jedi going undercover and working as a mechanic too. This especially worked because what Vernestra had been most concerned with seemed semi-apparent. While the mechanics weren't the most important beings inside the Trade Federation Navy, they were worker bees that lived around the facilities. The undercover Jedi on the vessel had been tracking communications, and what they learned was that there was an individual apparently close in contact to the leaders of this vessel and/or the Trade Federation itself. They were constantly speaking, and this alerted Vernestra to be worried about the situation. This had to be something more than just some routine contact. It wasn't like the communication was all about business. It simply asked for the location of the twins over and again. The Federation members were completely transparent, and that never did change for them. This inspired Vernestra and Tassie to go to the vessel and investigate. However, it was Tassie who suggested that they didn't. If the Jedi were seen on the same vessel, it could blow the cover of their operative, and it could also encourage the twins to run. Master Rowe agreed, deciding that instead, they should report their findings to the Council. On the flip side, inside the same cruiser, Osha and Mae were thriving together. They had their sisterhood back, and that was infinitely more rewarding than serving the Jedi or Sith. The two of them still had their ability to use the Force, but they didn't really touch those abilities. They let them simmer, so it was kind of like muscle memory. They would only be activated with practice, which they were not doing at the moment. Osha thrived exponentially from the truth, and she did start to come around to Sol, wondering if there were any words he would have preferred to share with her. She believed and agreed with her sister, in that Sol had made a terrible mistake. However, he was still someone that meant a great deal to her, especially without the influence of the dark side. The sisters did not know they were being watched. However, they were aware that a tall Mun banker continued to make his way into the vessel. The Jedi had to tread lightly with the entire scenario. The Trade Federation was making a push to get true representation within the Republic. If the Jedi disrupted this, Senator Rancourt could return with a vengeance. He had been in the public eye for the past 2 years, being the most verbal against the Jedi Order. While many didn't agree, he was able to convince a few that the Council feared could become a many. Vernestra and her student went to Quinn to speak with Master Sol, without permission from the Council. It may have been beyond her place, but aside from keeping an eye on the twins, she noted that there was something larger at play. This existed within the Trade Federation, the Senate, and in her former pupil. Vernestra and Sol had a nice reunion. It was very pleasant, especially for him. He enjoyed having his friend's acquaintance. He had been in solitude for 2 exact years, with very limited interaction with others. Master Rowe informed her friend about her feelings on the matter, and he believed she was right about this being interconnected. But his main concern was, well, Osha's well-being, which was fine, she was content, and that's all that really mattered to him. But if he could aid his former apprentice with this, then he would. Vernestra gave him the choice to break his vow to the Council, and he took it without a second thought. Being removed from the Order meant nothing to him if Osha wasn't safe. Vernestra understood this, but only now realized that his attachment to her would forbid him from ever living as a true Jedi again. Inside the cruiser, the Mun banker returned, and the undercover Jedi finally got the chance to investigate the interior of his ship. What he found horrified him. The Jedi was able to locate several artifacts that belonged to a Sith, including a hologram, a book with Sith writing, and of course the Crimson lightsaber. He got a hold of all this information and sent a message out to Vernestra Rome before slipping out of the engine compartment into the main ship to quietly escape. Vernestra was in the middle of her conversation with Sol when this alert came through. The three of them ran to the shuttle they arrived in and quickly left, with Padawan Tassi on the controls. When they arrived outside the Trade Federation cruiser, they had informed their spy to lock down the vessel hangars and shut off its mainframe without cutting the oxygen. Tassi was instructed by her master to find the spy and get to the bridge and learn who this individual was. At the same time, Sol and Vernestra would make their way in to confront said individual. They ran out. While Sol may have not been with the Jedi for 2 years, he had remained steadfast in his training. It helped ease his mind. As they ran down the corridors, they found the Mun man being escorted by some B-1 type battle droids. The lead droid pointed forward, asking who they were, and what they were doing. The Jedi addressed themselves as such, and Vernestra took point, asking who this banker was. Hego Damask II introduced himself as such, explaining that he had business here. Knowing that he was hiding his true identity, similar to Qimir, she readied her weapon, telling Hego that he would come along with them. The droid sat under the shadow of this monstrous individual and moved to the sides of the hull so Hego could step forward. He mumbled under his breath, telling the two Jedi that they had just put the lives of every individual inside the ship in danger. From his cloak came a crimson lightsaber, and the two Jedi reacted immediately. The young Sith Lord marched forward, jabbing his blade at the two Jedi. Sol and Plagueis were about the same age by this point, and their weapons connected. Plagueis dipped away from a strike made by Vernestra, who didn't use the light whip function on her blade. Plagueis snarled. The weapon that was discovered inside of his ship wasn't even his. That's the worst part. It belonged to a Jedi he had killed on Jedha. Just another lost face, one that wouldn't even be memorable to the Order. He bled that crystal for self-growth, for more power, and he drove his weapon at his opponents. On the bridge, Tassi and the spy demanded answers from the Trade Federation. In fear of losing their positioning with the Senate for monopolizing the galaxy, quietly, they revealed half-truths, telling them that these were investors, trying to build their own conglomerate. There were multiple? Yes, the Bith and Mun. Tassi looked to the spy who was unaware. She then told them to contact the Bith and tell them that the deal was off. The Jedi had found their friend and it was over. Maybe a bit too reactionary, but she was a Padawan after all. In the halls below, the Jedi and Sith were at it again, shredding through the walls as Plagueis did everything he could to get one of these Jedi on the ground. Sol dove in, bashing forward before defending himself, switching into his main defensive form, giving Vernestra room to activate the light whip and sling it around Plagueis' leg. He wailed in anger before swinging down on the purple weapon, before being confronted with a lost hand when Sol cut it off. Vernestra deactivated the whip and swung forward. Her form was a split, something unique to her, similar into uniqueness of what would become Mace Windu's Vapad. She had her own form. This left Plagueis in a bind as he led a fighting retreat. With news from the bridge that another was coming, they told the Trade Federation captain to contact the Jedi Temple as they left, running to the hangar base to cut off the escape of their other opponent. They didn't know for a fact that this Sith was on the way, but he attempted to kill everyone in the room by lifting them all off the ground and choking them, before the communication was cut by one of their deckhands, so they had every right to assume that he probably would come and try and kill them. The halls continued to erupt in destruction. Plagueis launched Sol from his feet as Vernestra pushed forward, but was cut off as he slashed the control panel, separating them immediately. She drove her blade into the wall as he ran. As he got to his ship, he found that it was completely grounded. Someone had done something to the engine compartment. Those rancid Jedi. He snarled to himself. Plagueis ran down the ramp to fix whatever it was that was broken, and when he did, he looked at two Jedi with their lightsabers ignited. There was a spy. Now that person would die, and the Padawan. Plagueis drove forward, putting both of the Jedi on the defense. Sol and Vernestra broke through the door that was closed in front of them, and they could hear the blades clashing away. Shock filled their faces as they ran forward, breaking into the hangar just in time to see the spy caught down, and Tassi lose her leg. She fell onto the ground as the Sith was about to strike her down. Plagueis felt sizzling pain from his wrist. His eyes looked at the light whip that covered his still one remaining hand. He snarled in anger, using all of his power to drag her forward, which pulled Vernestra off balance. She deactivated the light whip, but it was too late. Only It didn't kill the Master, it killed the apprentice. Tassie fell into Vernestra's hands as Sol lunged forward, blocking what would have been a fatal strike on a 100-year-old Jedi Master. He shoved backwards, and as he did, Sol grabbed Tassie's lightsaber and swung it through Plagueis' hip, watching him drop to the ground. Sol didn't stop there. Having not fully healed from Khofar, he drove his lightsaber into Plagueis' chest, as Vernestra yelled out telling him not to do that. They needed to question him, and now they couldn't. She let her student down, closing her eyes. In the coming hours, they would prepare to return to Coruscant with new intel, when they realized that another ship was arriving. When it landed, a Sith bounced out, full of anger. He was here to cover everything up. This entire ship would be cratered into the side of the moon it was hovering over. He drove his lightsaber at the two Jedi who delicately defended themselves. He then swung his fist forward, using a cortosis glove to deactivate Vernestra's lightsaber. She ducked under a swing, using her hands to beat back his attack, before pulling into her hands a green lightsaber from her fallen student, and igniting it. Sol and Vernestra were driven back. This was a true Sith Lord, one ready to kill everyone. He slammed his hand outwards, and it threw both of them off their feet, sending them tumbling into the corridor that led to the hangar. He turned back and used all of his strength to rip apart the hull of the Jedi ship, before shoving it out of the hangar and into space, left to drift to the ground. No one would be escaping this vessel. He marched into the corridor, each of his strikes stronger than the last. Vernestra was kicked into an opposite corridor as Tenebras pushed forward against Sol, throwing him backwards and cutting a panel to seal him into a hall alone with Sol. Sol rolled over, igniting his lightsaber to the side of him, as he kept a low center of gravity, before bouncing up and blocking a strike and throwing his opponent's blade to the side as the weapons dragged across the wall. He gritted his teeth before being thrown back again. Sol looked up and asked what he was. The fifth Sith Lord stormed forward, only saying a few words, them being that he was the last thing Sol would ever see. Vernestra was trying to break into the hall, but she couldn't. Sol defended himself with all of his might, but he was wearing fast. The first fight against Plagueis felt like it would be the end, but this being was too powerful. Sol accidentally clipped the cortosis glove before diving to the side to avoid a lethal strike. Sol's shoulder was pierced when Tenebras swung back, driving the blade into the Jedi. He wheezed in pain as he held his hand up. Tenebras tried to drive the lightsaber into Sol's heart, but Sol was using the Force with all of his strength to cement the blade inside of his shoulder. Sol was hit with the back of the cortosis glove as Tenebras prepared to finish the job. As he was about to, he was dragged backwards. The Sith Lord turned and with shock defended himself from 3 lightsabers, but the most terrifying one was one smaller than him. Grandmaster Yoda charged in. At only 766 years old, the Jedi warrior lunged in, launching Tenebras off balance. Sol ducked out of the way as Master Rancisis followed him in, with Vernestra by their sides. Yoda was fierce, small, and still, in his mind, young. His weapon charged in, avoiding counters from the Sith and the cortosis. Yoda smacked against him with all of his strength and watched the Sith tumble across the ground. Oppa went to Sol's side and helped him up. While he wasn't supposed to be here, they would deal with that later. Yoda stood strong, raising his lightsaber to his side as Tenebras rose. Rolling his shoulder, he lunged in. Their lightsabers collided in the middle. Yoda leapt off the Sith Lord, who swung at him but missed. Yoda used the walls to his advantage, as the other 3 Jedi watched in almost pure awe. They wanted to help, but honestly, how could they? The Sith Lord used all of his strength to defy the Grand Master, but it was almost impossible. Yoda batted away attacks, avoiding the cortosis glove, and when the moment was right, he completely removed the Sith's forearm, using the cortosis glove with the Force and launching it into Tenebras's lightsaber, leaving him defenseless. Yoda then avoided lightning from the Sith Lord, before lunging forward, his weapon piercing the Sith's body, killing him instantly, as his torso fell over his legs into 2 pieces, and it was over. The events following this would have a reunion between former master and apprentice, where Sol would tell Osha that he was wrong. He did what he did because he did love her like a daughter, and all the while he was doing what he thought was best for her, not what was actually best for her. It was a mistake on his end, and he hoped that there could be forgiveness, but if not, he understood. While Osha still needed time, perhaps that was the best way for them to end things for now. The Jedi would return to Coruscant with the bodies of 2 dead Jedi, and 2 dead Sith. Everything would be tracked down by various members of the High Council, including soon-to-be Counselor Ki-Adi-Mundi. Despite what Sol did inside the cruiser, he would be removed from the Jedi Order, which he was accepting of. While Senator Rayancourt would try and capitalize off the Jedi's interaction with the Trade Federation, it would actually alienate him. The Federation would find temporary placement inside the Senate, but without wealthy investors like Hego Damask helping them maintain power, it slipped out of their hands within a decade. Rey and Court's constituents and caucus would lose favorability. The Senate would loosen its view on the Jedi as well, because they looked back at their history and overlooked some of their laws under Chancellor Drellick. Much of Rey and Court's position and influence of the Trade Federation have been enforced by the Sith. Without their influence or presence, the Jedi were able to weasel their way out of the oversight from the Senate. Their actions had proved their loyalty to the Republic and the citizens of it. Master Vernestra, after having led a life of loss, would accept her place among the wisest minds of the Jedi Order as a counselor, eventually taking the mantle of Master of the Order, before eventually passing away shortly after Yoda started training a young boy born in 102 BBY named Dooku, another 40 years or so at the helm of the Jedi Order. While there would be a child born on Naboo named Sheev Palpatine in the decades after, his life wouldn't fall down the path of darkness. Evil sat at his heart, but a wanderer on behalf of the Guardians of the Whills would pick him up. Sol had become one of their most influential voices, and it would be with Sol that Sheev Palpatine would learn love, find peace, and start anew. The sisters, Osha and Mae, would also have their happiness, finding love and light in their own respective lives, and this did include a beautiful reunion that eventually did occur between Master and Apprentice. And that, my friends, is our story. Again, special thanks to all the patrons: Benjamin Wells, Ozpin, Angel Dust, Darth Vitiate, Seju Jagger, Groot36, Hunter Belden, Rosebird, Angel Dust, Alexandra Reese, The Beginning and End, Django Fat Clone, Nick 5098, Ben Ingram, The Big Red Pure Mark, Diamond Constant, Darth Nemesis, Lord Tibbs, CC2024, Gallivant Gaming, Tristan, Mandalore, Sirwell 1767, Darth Revan, Grandy Bane, Laliant, Sky Guy, Penguin, Cullen Rooney, Shark Midori, RJ38, Nick, Michael Erlanger, The Last Jedi, Apollo Weewoo 670, Annika Stank Runner, CT7567, Toaster Oven, Oz of Oz, Darth Nox, The Eternal Padawan, Joshua Tem, Johnny Naguin, Saint the Skeleton, Jedi Sloth, Mr. Yeet Gamer, Lord Cali, Young Lisa 66, Madman Studios, Anakin003, Lord Draken, 46 Star Wars, Airbus, Rex the Wolf, many 3 first names, Darksling 46, Baron Joshua, and Lord Deadwing. For supporting the channel, smash that like button. Let's talk about this story. So I really wanted to take the idea of Master Sol killing Qimir in an act of rage being exactly what the Jedi kind of needed to set it up. It kind of goes back to how Anakin uses his power, and even Kanan uses his power without the restrictions of the code, and how that actually would set the Jedi up for a potential situation where they could succeed. Of course, I'm kind of filling the gaps of what could be or would be an Acolyte Season 2 with some added lore and different aspects, but I really wanted to convey the Jedi, specifically individuals that were invested in the event, taking notice in it. I believe that Vernestra would not inform the Council about this event because there was no concrete evidence to prove it was a Sith. I believe that the Council would be more interested in Senator Rey and Court's decisions at the end of Acolyte, which would be at the beginning of this story. I also believe that at 30 years old or so, Plagueis would be not as capable as he would be, as we saw in this recent video with the Dooku discovering Anakin video. And after my little tangent here, I definitely wanted to show Yoda in like a little bit more of his prime. He's in his 70s, you know, he's getting up there, but I also wanted to kind of have him like going off the rails, beating the crap out of Tenebras at the end. I thought that was kind of cool. I think Yoda at 766 would be as vibrant as a 250-year-old Yoda. So I hope you all enjoyed the story. I had a lot of fun running it. If you want to see more Acolyte or High Republic, you know, smash that like button. You know the deal. I love you all, spread the love, and always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.